and good evening. As the COVID-19 pandemic fallout speaks across the country, it has had a significant impact on the education sector. That's no secret. As the days pass by with no immediate solution to the pandemic in sight, school and university closures have had a significant impact on the continuity of learning for more than 285 young learners in India. What's more, migrant crisis has showcased the teeming millions of the unskilled workforce who've returned to their home states. This group is in dire need for skilling or upskilling, if you will. Now, this crisis has also highlighted the need to reassess the structure of schooling and learning in India and prepare it to meet the challenges of the times. But every crisis, as they say, is an opportunity in disguise. It is up to us, and it is time now to take up the challenges of upgrading India's education system to be ready to meet the needs of the new age. This special presentation of the Living Room Conclave has been presented by Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham. It is also co-powered by Deakin University, Australia, one of Australia's foremost universities. And I have an eminent panel with me tonight. Ian Martin, he is the president as well as the vice chancellor of Deakin University, joins us for this special broadcast. Mayank Kumar, co-founder and MD of Upgrad, is on the panel. Raghunath Shivgaonkar, vice chancellor of Bennett University, is with us, and Akshay Munjal, president of BML Munjal, completes the panel. Thank you all for being with us tonight. Let me start with Ian Martin, if I could. Thank you, Ian, for joining us, first of all. Let me start with asking you, with Deakin in particular, how have existing courses been affected, first of all, at Deakin University? And how is Deakin confident that more digital courses, online learning courses will be as effective as what we used to have before the pandemic hit in terms of regular courses? What is your opinion on that?
So Deakin had in February about 18,000 students studying fully online and about 40 to 50,000 students studying in our campuses. In early March, we pivoted to put all of those 64,000 students into an online mode of study, and we used the experience that we've had over the last 20 to 30 years of distance and digital education to pivot into that mode. We put the expertise in there, we monitored very closely what was happening, and we regularly spoke with teachers and students around what was working. In the main, it has been a fantastic experience in terms of what we've been able to do at very short notice. The evaluation from our first 2 to 3 months of teaching was almost the same as it was 12 months ago, largely on campus. Now, clearly, there are still some things you can't do online. Some of the engineering practicals, some of the laboratory practicals, we'll return to those later. But I think it has demonstrated the agility and the adaptability of our institution to pivot rapidly into this mode and build on the experience we already had.
That's very interesting and very encouraging to know. Let me just come up with a follow-up question there, Ian, if I could. How relevant do you think, especially given the pandemic, nobody really expected this, completely threw the entire world out of gear, and we're faced with a situation that nobody really was geared up for. How relevant do you think, Ian, and how do you ensure, first of all, that the new sort of improved or modified curriculum, especially with digital and online courses, how relevant do you think it is? And also, I would like you to throw some light on your connect with industry in pandemic times. Has that been affected at all?
So look, I think there wouldn't be an education institution, a university anywhere in the globe that's not been impacted by COVID-19. I think it has challenged all of us to do the changes and the pivots that we've needed to take. But I think what it has done is made us really focus on what matters, what's absolutely important in the education, what do we want to focus on. But also, increasingly over the last few months, we've turned our attention to what comes next. We will come out the other side of the COVID-19 pandemic, and I think education is going to be fundamentally changed globally because of that. Industry has shifted at the same time, and certainly in Australia, many of our big corporates are having 70, 80, 90% of their staff working from home in a digital environment. That's not going to change anytime soon. And many of them are talking about a new normal. And our education has to match that, has to match the skills for the future. Whether we're talking about career starters, career progressors, or perhaps, unfortunately, just at the moment, many people whose industries have been very, very disrupted who are looking to change careers. All of those are going to need that new mode of education, which I think we can learn from what we've done, continue to do digitally what's best done digitally, but remember there will always be a place for some things that have to be done on the campus.
Let me now throw this discussion open to my other guest, Raghunath Shivgaonkar. Let me ask you this and pivot, as Ian said, to India-specific questions here. Deakin University seems to have a grip on how to deal with the changing scenario. How do you see Indian institutions now, first of all, grappling with the crisis and making sure that linkages between institutions and students, especially those who don't really have the kind of access to online education that we would like, really? How has that affected education in India, according to you? Also, Mr. Shivgaonkar, I'd like you to throw some light on how do you think Indian institutions will be placed now, whether or not they will have the kind of ease to kind of go into rather easily or pivot into rather easily as compared to some international universities, Deakin, for example. Where do you think Indian institutions stand as far as that is concerned?
Yeah, so firstly, when this COVID pandemic started, I think within no time, the universities, they aligned themselves to deal with the situation. So, for example, if you take the Bennett University, I think within about 10 days' time, the faculty and students were almost geared to take the whole classes and examination into online mode. And as a result of that, I think within a month, all the curriculum was completed, the examinations were completed. So at Bennett University, if you see, the practically everything finished on time. Of course, there were challenges, and as you rightly said, there was a connectivity issues which were there. But I think large number of people really could handle it. We have to come up with some innovative solutions, like when you have a lecture, can you leave a lecture, recorded lecture, so students can see it at their own ease when the technology is, connectivity is available to them. So, of course, there are challenges there. But given this COVID pandemic, I think there are many things which in our country we wanted to do, they got accelerated. So online education was coming in India anyway, but I think this was a great opportunity to really accelerate it and use this platform to really expand our education base to a much larger audience in the country.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Shivgaonkar, I just want to quickly go across to Akshay Munjal also, because I also want to go back later in the program to Mayank Kumar and discuss the role of industry and how the linkages between institution and industry has changed post-COVID. But first, I want to go across to Mr. Munjal rather quickly and ask him, Mr. Munjal, how do you see the scenario now, given the fact that even as Mr. Shivgaonkar was suggesting right now, that Indian catching up, so to say, has not been that bad. People, of course, expected far worse. I believe we've come out on the better side of it. But where are Indian industries placed, Indian universities placed, and how far into going into new courses, newer age courses, like AI, for example? How far do you think that particular distance has been covered by Indian universities?
Sure. Let me start first by thanking you for having me on this show. And before I address your answer specifically, I'd like to make a point here. I think the biggest silver lining COVID has had on higher education, that it's completely disrupted how higher education was continuing. We in higher education were very reluctant to change. And what COVID has done is just accelerated change beyond anybody's imagination. Some of these trends of online education, blended learning were already there, but they've been greatly accelerated with COVID. And to specifically answer your question, I think Indian institutes were pretty much geared up and ready to take on this challenge. And specifically now what's going to happen, given that earlier you were restricted by physical size of the class, you could have 60 students maximum in a class. Today that boundary is blurred. Today a faculty member sitting anywhere, any part of the world, can teach X number of students. So courses like AI, ML, machine learning, today is a fantastic opportunity to reach a much wider audience, which
So
we
let me
never
get
had
this
earlier.
right. Akshay, if I've gotten you correctly, and correct me if I'm getting you wrong here, you're saying that the pandemic, COVID-19, the virus is clearly a challenge to all of humankind, clearly, more so to developing countries like India, but it's also a huge opportunity. It came as a huge opportunity to kind of put that particular pace in our education system that perhaps would have taken a long time coming had things not changed. Am I right? Yes or no?
I fully agree with you.
All right, fair enough. On that
Absolutely.
note, because we have commercial commitments as well, before I go across to Mayank Kumar, with whom I want to discuss the linkages with the industry and the need to upskill, so to say, we have to take a very quick break. We'll be back in no time. This discussion is just getting started. Stay with us. You're watching a special presentation, Living Room Conclave India Education Mission. Without wasting any time, Mayank Kumar, let me ask you, since you represent the industry side of our panel, how important is it for universities, and how does it really help universities today to work closely with industry to make sure that they develop products and solutions, skilling solutions, because the common refrain, as I'm sure you're aware, has been in the past few years that students are getting educated, they're getting degrees, but they're not employable. So how does it benefit industry to have a far closer linkage with universities? And do you see that enough in India?
No, I think that's a fair question that you're asking, but if you look at overall, what we are noticing right now is that the level of interaction between industry and academia has increased tremendously, and people are now collaborating a lot. Specifically from our side, from Upgrad, in this period of pandemic, we have so far now partnered with 100 plus educational institutions to take their programs online, to enable them to offer their sort of learning online. And along with that sort of learning module, we're also bringing in experts from the industry who are actually practitioners of some of these new age skills. See, look, in today's context, skills are slightly ahead of, or last mile skills is slightly sort of moved ahead of the education that happens in the university. But if the two comes together, magic ends up happening at the end of the day, because the learner not just learns from the university, the pure hardcore academics, but the hands-on practice allows them to become employable the moment they get out of the university. So I think in this context, what we have noticed is that both university and industry coming together in the current online space allows us to make sure that the learner and the student population are getting far more employable in this journey. And that's a trend essentially that has gotten accelerated even now with a lot of university, as you rightly asked the question earlier, that online education and AI skilling and machine learning, etc., are becoming far more mainstream. And that is only happening because academics has got their own strengths and they're collaborating quite closely with the industry to take some of these learnings to the end user and to the end consumer, where you can sort of create more employable workforce for the future.
I also want to talk about how the teaching method has changed over the years, especially now. And I want to go back to Ian Martin on this. Deakin, Ian, as we all know, is one of the most progressive universities in Australia. It's been progressive from the very beginning, and it's been one of the first to embrace new age teaching methods and technology. How have you seen the evolution of pedagogy or the teaching method really evolve in the last, let's say, a decade or so? Just throw some light on that if you could.
So I think that the way we've approached designing the curriculum has changed. You've already heard about the importance of industry engagement and having that perspective from the outside in designing the curriculum and delivering the curriculum, moving away from a very passive lecture to student model to an active learning model where we use technology to help frame the information to the students. They have to work their way through that, and then you use the face-to-face time either digital face-to-face time or physical face-to-face time to actively explore the concepts that you've been talking about or feed that through into a practical class. So it's become a very, very practical, active approach to learning. And I think that has really benefited. I think the other thing that's changed is the approach to assessment. If you think about what students need to do in the workplace, they never have to sit down for a 3-hour closed exam. They have to carry out projects. They have to do written pieces of interpretation of information for the organization. So we're looking at adapting and changing our assessment to, again, make that more real world ready.
Ian, again, quick question here. I have limited time here, but have you seen an uptick really in terms of admissions and online course applications in the past, let's say, 5 years? And what do you put that down to if the answer is yes?
Most of our domestic growth within Australia over the last 2-3 years has been online. That has been translated now into some really quite dramatic increases online. So for our second trimester intake this year, our applications were up about 30%. And now we're seeing globally an acceptance of digital and hybrid digital physical delivery. We're seeing more interest internationally as well. So absolutely, we're seeing the interest.
Fair enough. Let me go back to Raghunath Shivgaonkar here and go back to asking him again, at the cost of repeating myself, Mr. Shivgaonkar, these new courses that we just spoke about, be it architecture, data science, AI, cybersecurity, sports, business analytics, public health, mechatronics, robotics, etc., etc. Now, do you think that there is enough interest here in India as far as these new age courses are concerned? Has your university seen an uptick in interest in this?
Absolutely, I think this is the future, and the courses I think you are talking about are going to be the basically core of many of the applications in industry. So even in Bennett University, we have put more thrust on artificial intelligence, data sciences.
We have started specialization in this, and I'm sure many of the other universities also are going to follow the similar kind of path. So there is absolutely a great requirement in there from the industrial point of view in these areas.
All right, fair enough. Mr. Munjal, would you agree, would you concur with Mr. Shivgaonkar that there is a huge interest as far as these new courses are concerned, and also the fact that Indian universities are also adapting according to the situation we have, not just embracing and accepting that the world is changing, the teaching methods are changing, and the needs of the students are changing. Also the fact that skilling is now not just merely a buzzword, it's a major requirement now.
I absolutely agree. I think today skilling is actually at the forefront, and industry and academia are very closely coupled with one another, and this coupling is just getting closer. The way I see it, in the next 5 to 10 years, academia will actually be at the forefront of this. Today, industry is leading, whether it's AI, ML, some of those areas you mentioned. But going ahead, and the way Indian academia has evolved in the last 10 years, I won't be surprised if Indian academia is actually leading this revolution at the front and industry is following.
All right, fair enough. I have another round of questions for my guests, but we have to take another short commercial break. When I come back, I'll ask Ian what makes Deakin University tick, and I'll ask the rest of my guests some other specific questions. Hopefully we have time. One more question on brain drain and reverse brain drain, but that's only if we have time. We'll take another short break right now. Come right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. I have limited time on the debate, so Ian Martin, let me just ask you in not so many words, what makes Deakin University tick? Also, in other words, if I may, did the fact that Deakin University identified the trend rather early, digitizing aggressively when the trend caught up, and also the fact that all your online courses are on the cloud, students from all over the world can access it, was that one of the reasons why Deakin became what it is?
So I think there's two reasons. One is an absolute passion to do well by our students and have students at the heart of the institution, but linked to a very, very strong digital spine, a digital background that give us the ability to switch really, really well.
All right, fair enough. That's what makes Deakin University tick. Let me quickly go back to Mayank Kumar on this. Mayank, I spoke, in fact, about there used to be a phenomena called brain drain, I believe, when we were growing up, at least when I was growing up. And there was this common refrain that all the best talent in the world is going to foreign universities. What's going to happen to India? Then there was this phenomena called reverse brain drain. Do you think all those concepts have been left irrelevant now? Because everything is digitized, as Ian was telling us, everything is on the cloud, and people anywhere in the world can access any other university in the world. So has that concept become redundant or obsolete now?
I think the best of the education, as you rightly said, is available at your doorstep. Today you can access the best of the university from the US to the UK or Australia actually coming to your doorstep. And we work very closely with Deakin University to enable them to sort of access a larger set of ecosystem within the Indian sort of population. But I think the fact that our Indian population is quite aspirational, and the working professional and students are getting very, very aspirational in the journey. So they want access to the best quality education right now. And given the fact online, digitization, and the current pandemic also to a very large extent has pushed students to delay the start date. But a lot of these pushing out of delaying of start date is getting covered with online programs, online degrees, online sort of offering, where learners are continue to learn while being in India, but access to one of the best global education coming from all across the globe, directly to the laptop or the desktop or the mobile phones.
Mr. Shivgamkar, what does the future hold for Indian students, Indian universities, institutions like yours? What does India and Indian institutions have to do to make sure that all our institutions, like Bennett, for example, compete at the same level, as, let's say, as Deakin University, and provide the same kind of opportunities, courses, what have you, for students across the world, not just in India? Mr. Shivgamkar, the question was for you, if you can hear me.
Yeah, so I can hear you. So actually, Indian universities have to do a couple of things. First is Indian universities have to really become quality conscious. Second thing, the research has to be brought back into the universities, and many universities, including Bennett, have put some thrust on the research. If the research is brought into the university, actually there will be a new temper which will be created inside the universities, and the academia itself will excel. So I think that is the direction in which the industries have to invest, and they have to come to the universities and start doing research.
There we have it, and that's our time. Thank you, gentlemen, for participating in this discussion. Ian Martin, my thanks to you for participating. Raghunath Shivgamkar, as well as Akshay Munjal and Mayank Kumar. We unfortunately are out of time, but we can't wrap up before mentioning our main sponsors. This program has been presented to you by Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham and co-powered by Deakin University, Australia. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Athar Khan. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.